So a common question that I get when people start learning about carb loading, they get the whole racing thing, but then they start to ask, well, why am I not carb loading for my training? Should I be carb loading for my training? When should I be carb loading for my training? Certainly not all the time, but maybe there is a time. We're going to discuss that today.
Thanks for tuning in. This is our third video in our carb loading series, and today we are going to talk about when it is appropriate to carb load for training, not just racing, but our training sessions.
Every day, every Friday night, and some other days.
It's kind of true. Friday nights, sometimes Monday nights in this household.
Not me.
What duration of training session would we want to consider carb loading for training?
Pretty much the same as racing. So if you watched our last video, we talked about what length of race, what duration of race, and not in miles, but in how long does the race last in time. It's sort of the same, 90 minutes to 4 hours, 2 hours to 5 hours kind of range is where the peak of that parabola of importance is, but you might want to be a little bit more reserved with deciding to carb load all your training.
Yeah, that was my next question. So do you want to be more liberal with your carb loading during training, or do you want to be a little bit more hesitant and restrictive in your carb loading for your training?
Yeah, you should be fueling training well enough all the time. So you should not be hearing restriction from us. You should be hearing fuel your training well enough all the time that you don't really need to be carb loading unless it's a big training session or especially important one, or maybe you just know that you don't fuel your training very well. And we'll get to some of those considerations, I think.
So would you say it would be more important to carb load like a high intensity effort that maybe has lots of hard intervals for 2 hours, or high zone 2, low zone 3, 4 hour training session? Where is the line drawn? What's the most if you're only going to carb load one session per week, which one would it be? Or can you even determine that without more details?
I guess it depends on the person and some other details, but in general, yeah, the higher the intensity is and the more you're at the peak of that parabola, like the 3 hour range, 4 hour range, yeah, the more important it gets. So if you're going to go for, it sounds like that 4 hour ride you mentioned has a little bit of quality, and we're talking high aerobic, maybe some threshold efforts in it. Absolutely, if you're riding a 4 hour ride and there's going to be anything other than low aerobic, if you got a threshold in there, definitely you should carb load somewhat at least the night before. If not, full on carb load the night before, day before.
So what about for runners then? So if you were training for anything from maybe a 10K in parts of the year to a marathon, what type of session would be the key session where you think, okay, if I'm going to carb load one of these, this is the one to do it for?
Yeah, probably the longest one, since runners training generally isn't as long in number of hours as cyclists. So if you have a 3 hour run, you should probably be carb loading. It gets more important for runners, I think, because 2 reasons. 1, you actually can't carry as much fuel, and 2, your gut can't absorb quite as much while running as it can if you're seated on a bike. And actually 3, runners don't like to carry things. Who likes to carry carbs, fuel, or whatever on your 90-minute run or 2 hour run? So that might be a reason to have more carbs the day before.
That's absolutely true. It's not as fun to carry a hydration pack while running as it is while cycling. Also, running in general, unless you're super fit, is generally a little bit higher intensity for most people. If you're super elite or you've been running for forever, maybe that's not the case, but for most, how do I say this? Not average, because what is average? But
most people like Alex.
Just people who maybe are a little bit newer to the sport or not quite as fit. If you are running, you're at a higher intensity in most cases, whereas you can pedal and move forward at an extremely easy pace.
That's very
Does that
true.
Make sense?
Makes total sense. You don't have to explain that one to me.
Okay. So what about in season, off season, different phases, different mesocycles in the annual plan? When would we want to think about carb loading more training sessions versus maybe carb loading less?
Some people get this maybe a little bit backwards because they're it's off season, I'm just gonna do whatever with my diet, and they make good reasons to eat a lot of overeat carbohydrates during certain seasons. And I think actually if your goal is health and performance optimization, you probably should focus on not carb loading as much in the off season, carb loading more as you get into in-season events, as your main events, or maybe you only do a couple events a year. As those events approach, it makes more sense to carb load for training sessions in the lead up to that for a couple of reasons. 1, it helps you with gut training. 2, it helps you practice actually what you're going to do the night or week before the event. Exposing yourself to what you'll actually do during racing is one reason to think about carb loading.
So you're saying more carb loading in pre-competitive during your B race season and competitive season versus way off season.
Yeah. Correct.
What types of training would carb loading be more important for, and what types of training would carb loading be less important for?
Give me more specifics.
Well, I don't know. It's just the bullet point you wrote down.
Well, certainly intervals. Anything where there might be fuel intake restrictions, it's important to have more carbs on board before you start, and you want just more glycogen stores topped off before anything higher intensity. You can get away with not carb loading after you hear about our app. Do you use the app?
Yeah, I definitely use the app. We made it for a reason because I was sick and tired of crunching numbers.
So what does it look like when you use it?
I grab my phone, go into the app. It knows a bunch of information about me that I've already plugged in, and I tell it what I'm doing for training. Actually, it already knows what I'm doing for training because it's pulling my workouts from Training Peaks, and it tells me exactly what I need for my fuel, hydration, for my training session or race.
Why do you use it?
Because I don't like being hypoglycemic and I don't like being hypotensive when I'm training. I like to feel good while I'm training and racing. I just don't like having to think, I guess. I just want to start my training session. I want to quickly get on the bike. I want to quickly start my run or my swim or my lift. I don't want to have to think about, oh, how long is this going to be? How hot is it going to be? How much am I going to be sweating? How much sodium am I going to be needing? How many grams of carbs am I going to be needing per hour? Am I getting my carbs from the appropriate sources? Am I going to get GI distress? Am I going to feel faint today? Am I going to be, hungry? I don't want to think about any of that stuff. I just want to do my session.
Punch it in. And...
Yeah, I don't even punch it in because it already knows what I'm
Peaks.
doing from Training Peaks. But, you could punch it in if you wanted to.
I actually haven't used the Training Peaks sync feature because I don't plan my training in Training Peaks, so I just punch it in and it's easy enough.
Probably not a lot of our viewers do this, but let's say there was a hybrid athlete who is doing a ton of training in the weight room, for example. They might be in the weight room for 3 hours lifting, or they might be, riding their bike for 3 hours, and they might be going for a 3-hour run. Are there differences in training modalities, or yoga for 3 hours? You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
When would it be more important to carb load versus not?
We've actually had a number of court sports, tennis players, pickleball. We've got we love that you're watching us, and actually a lot of the hydration stuff that we talk to you all about applies especially for folks in the south of the United States.
Yeah.
Generally, the more steady your sport is, the fewer breaks that you get in your sport. Maybe not steady, cycling can be very pulsatile in its effort, whereas running is definitely more steady. But the fewer breaks that you get, the more important carb loading will be, because there's not a chance for you to catch up on the carbs that you need during the training. Whereas if you're playing tennis, there's breaks between sets, there's breaks between points, there's breaks between games. Carb loading will be much less important for somebody like that, even if your match is 4 hours long. But yeah, running, cycling, the typical endurance things, cross-country skiing, swimming, rowing, long endurance rowing.
Anytime you're taking a break or have opportunity for a lot of breaks during your session, carb loading will be less important.
Yep.
What about overall nutrition goals? Does that impact decision making at all?
Yeah, totally. So I used to work with primarily weight loss clients, now less so, more sport performance focused. And for folks who are in a weight loss phase, they shouldn't last forever. Number one, you shouldn't be losing weight all the time. If you're always dieting, hire a very smart coach.
It's a consult.
So yeah, you can give us a call. The more weight that you have to lose, the less you should be carb loading in training. Carb loading, we're still talking about the days before training, the days before that important big training session that you have. Whereas if you are 5% fat and maybe you've had disordered eating in the past, you still have tendencies towards restriction, you should be carb loading probably fairly regularly in training. Especially if you're still grappling, dealing with restrictive tendencies, and you're still walking through that.
Or you're calculating and crunching your watts per kilo on a daily basis or a weekly basis.
Yeah, carb loading is probably a good idea for you. Truly, you could probably carb load once a week and it would be excellent for your health and performance. And so there's a continuum for folks who are very, very lean, sort of pushing the limits or over the limits of what's helpful for sport performance, to folks who primarily need to lose weight. You all do sport because it's a means to help you lose weight and be lead a physically active life. There's a continuum. For folks in the middle, maybe once a month at most. Should you be carb loading in the off season, and then in season once every 2 or 3 weeks as a rule of thumb. Very loose rule of thumb, but it can be frankly, I never carb load in the off season. It's not worth doing. I might carb load one training session before a race. Michelle, how often do you carb load?
Mostly in the in-season, but yeah, I mean, I consume so many carbs on a daily basis for just my normal training that I don't need to carb load for most of my training in the off-season just because I am well-fueled before, during, and after. Trying to think of a time where I would feel the need to carb load in the off-season just because my carb intake is already so high.
Usually, I think I've seen you carb load if your training session is going to be like 5 hours or more.
Yeah, if it's going to be a 5-hour or more session and I'm going to be doing, lots of zone 3 work or something or higher, then I will. But I think honestly, I just maybe this is not appropriate to say. My natural tendency is like low grade carb loading all the time anyway. That before training sessions, that I don't really even consciously think about it because I just think, oh, I have a big training session tomorrow. I need to have extra carbs tonight or during the day or during my session or whatever. So I don't necessarily plan it out because it's almost automatic now.
I was going to say it's almost automatic.
Yeah.
And you train so much.
And I just have appropriate carbs around. It's almost like brushing my teeth. I'm like, oh, I have a big session, carbs. Gut tolerance and gut adaptations. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the more you need to get your gut on board with consuming carbs, the more you should be thinking about carb loading. If you are a person who has routinely not fueled your training, chances are your gut isn't the most responsive yet to taking on the fuel that you need during training. If you find yourself regularly having carb-induced GI distress, you eat 50 or 60 grams of carbs in an hour and you've done everything else right, you got your hydration right and everything is right during your training, and that amount of intra-workout carbohydrate causes some GI distress for you, you're totally a person who could benefit from carb loading because it simply exposes your gut to more carbohydrate and more sugar, which it will adapt to and get better at absorbing. But just a reminder, if you are having GI distress on 50 to 60 grams of carbs per hour, it's vastly more likely that you're doing something else wrong. Some other detail of your fueling is wrong, whether it's the glucose-fructose ratio or your hydration, sodium, water, or the pulsatility of your carb consumption over the course of the training session. Whatever you're selecting, there's something else wrong. 99.9% of people can consume that amount and be fine.
That's a pretty low amount, even for running fast. Heat can definitely be a problem for that, so making sure that you're consuming enough water can really help with that.
I'm supposed to advertise that I am doing some consults. You can book with me on our website, saturdaymorning.fit. Normally $400 an hour for the hour session or $250 for the 30-minute, but I'll cut that and figure it out, so you can expect something lower than that. But yeah, I look forward to talking with you. It's really rewarding to hear what you're doing, often very epic things, and then helping you dial in whatever you need.
Yeah, or even suggestions that people have given us too on those calls, information that we can be sharing or ways that we can modify the app to make it more useful for people.
Very true.
It's really helpful.
And last but not least, our next video is the science behind how you should decide how many days before your big event or your training you should actually carb load.
We'll see you then.
See you next time.